We're going to quickly today, because I'm going to try and keep this to 20 minutes, do 2 recipes that can show you how to use the browning process and also a little bit of some natural sugar and caramelization to make some vegetables that are really tasty to eat. So the first one we're going to do is Italian roasted vegetables. You can use whatever vegetables you like or have available. Since it's Italian, I like to keep it to a red, white, green kind of theme. That's me personally. You can add whatever you want. So I like to use things like cauliflower, zucchini for the white, garlic for the red. We'll use some of these little cherry tomatoes as well as some red peppers. And then for the green, you can use green peppers. I like to use Brussels sprouts. And then because I really like mushrooms, they're brown. They don't count, but you won't know. So what we're going to do is quickly run through how you pull all this together. So for Brussels sprouts, if you've never seen them, these things actually, I always thought they grew like little tiny rows of cabbages in the ground. No. They grow on a big stalk, and there are lots of them. You're starting to see in some really nice grocery stores, you can actually buy these still on the stalk. Most places they'll look like this in a bag or loose in a bin. You want to wash them. You want to cut off where it was removed from the stalk, dries out. So all you want to do for these to prep them for roasting is cut off that nasty end bit and split them in half. Take away any loose leaves that fall off when you do it, like so, and throw them in your bowl of stuff that we're going to put some seasoning on before we roast it. For cauliflower, you know, when you buy it, it's in this big, ugly, knobby looking head. But once you start cutting into it, it's kind of like broccoli on the inside. You have all these little individual florets. What you want to do is just get at, and I like to just sort of one at a time to keep it from getting way out of hand on me. You want to make it manageable. Pretend I'm doing this to the whole head, but for the sake of 20 minutes, I'm going to show one piece. All you want to do here, and make sure people can actually see this, all you want to do is take this and kind of quarter it, and make sure sometimes up inside the head, some of these outside leaves will kind of grow up, and then make sure you get that out. Those don't taste very good. But you basically want to get this into sort of bite-sized pieces, throw it in there. Tomatoes, super easy. If you get grape or cherry tomatoes, literally, I cut them in half, throw them in the bowl. I mean, as vegetable prep goes, it doesn't get a whole lot easier than this, guys. With garlic, you can buy whole heads of garlic like this. If you do, you just want to remove the papery outer skin and you'll get down to individual cloves. There's another layer of sort of papery skin over those. If you put one in kind of under the knife and pop it, you can get them out of there pretty easily. But if you roast these, what you'll end up with are these nice whole cloves of garlic. You can also, if you're like me, cheat and just buy the bags like this. For something where I'm going to roast the whole head or whole cloves like this, you can buy bagged, pre-stripped, ready to go garlic. These, you just throw them right in the bowl. It's really easy. I know you're thinking garlic, trust me, when you roast it, it sort of caramelizes, the flavor becomes very mild. You can kind of smash those and spread them on some bread. They're really, really good. With mushrooms, okay, these things grow in the dark, in dirt, with lots of nasty stuff in there. Wash them really, really well. Even if they come pre-sliced and they look nice and clean, wash them again anyway. And then with these, you just want to cut off where they've picked them or cut them. There's usually sort of a woody end. Just cut that off, cut them in half, throw them in the bowl. With peppers, you can either buy these little mini sweet peppers. These guys are really easy because they have hardly any seeds in them. Literally, I'll cut off the top, split them, and then split them the other way so they're sort of quartered. If there's any seeds or there's this sort of white papery, I'll show you on the inside here. You get this sort of white papery where the seeds are. I just kind of peel that off, split them into nice bite-sized pieces, and throw them in the bowl. If you use the larger peppers, so bell peppers are very sweet. I washed this, but I missed the tag on it, sorry. You can use the red, you can use orange, you can use yellow, you can use green. Totally up to you. I don't find the flavor to be significantly different, other than the green ones have a little bit of an unripened taste. I don't know quite how to describe that. You can sort of taste the greenness, but between the red, the yellow, the orange, I've even seen purple, once they've ripened, there's really no flavor difference. These guys will tell you how they want to be cut. So if you look at the end of this from that angle, you can see there's ridges running down the side. Some peppers have 3, some peppers have 4. All you have to do is put your knife in and slice right along that ridge. And when you do that, you can peel this piece off, and it leaves that big pod underneath the stem with all the seeds in it out of your way. Then you just have to come along here and clean up any of that sort of white papery skin that grows around the seeds. Rinse it off really well. These are already been washed, but these I like to cut into strips, and then again I'll just sort of cut them into bite-sized chunks, and you toss them in. From a Italian roasted vegetable, it's really that simple. I'm going to show you here in a second how we're going to dress this before we pop it in the oven. But you get your assorted vegetables, whatever you like. The goal here is get them to be in bite-sized pieces, because nobody wants to cut up their vegetables. You want them to be able to pop on the plate, put a fork in it, stick it in your mouth, and not look like you're being rude with your mouth full of food. For this recipe, we're going to use about 3 tablespoons of olive oil. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3. You can measure. I pour a lot of olive oil. We're pretty close. This is optional. I really like the flavor that it adds. If you've got some balsamic vinaigrette, you could also use like a red wine vinegar if you have that. We're going to drizzle about a tablespoon in there. We don't want too much. This stuff's pretty strong, but you immediately sort of get that smell. I like to put about a half a tablespoon of coarse salt. I use like kosher salt. You want to put about a tablespoon, and this one just so I can compare to you, I'll measure it. You want to put about a tablespoon of this Italian seasoning premix. If you don't have the premix on the recipe on the website, I give you a, hey, what things do you put together? The premix is great because literally you don't have to mix and match. It's a teaspoon of that. I like to add just a little fresh black pepper. We're going to take this. All you're going to do is stir this around to make sure everything gets well coated. Alright, because the oil's down in there, the spices are in there, you've got the vinaigrette in there. Just give this a nice turn until everything looks good and wet. It's a good time to mention you want to have your oven preheated to about 400 to 425 degrees. So you want your oven a little hotter than you might normally bake at. We're going to take these. You're literally going to put them on a pan, spread them out. I like to use my hands. You can use your spatula if you want to get messy. And the goal here is try to get everything into one layer, because you want some air getting to these. Because of the juices that are coming out of them, if they're stacked too deep, the juices from the top ones will sink down, and you won't get browning on the bottom, you only get browning on the top. So if you have a big group of people, use 2 pans, spread it out. You're going to pop this in the oven at 400 to 425 degrees, and you want to put it in there for about 15 minutes. Then you want to take a spatula, give it a good turn, and give it another 15 minutes. And when it comes out of the oven, I don't have the magic of TV, but I do have the magic of me getting up early on a Saturday morning. I already made a batch of these this morning. These are fresh. You'll see you start to get these nice roasty brown colors. Oh, they're so good. The tomatoes will start to wrinkle up, but because you've really concentrated the flavor, the tomatoes get nice and sweet. I'm looking for a piece of garlic to show you and prove to you you can eat garlic straight. So once the garlic has gone through the roasting process, It just melts like butter. But as you can see, you get lots of nice browns, you get some really dark colors. A couple of your smaller pieces of your peppers, you might even start to get some sort of charred edges. A few charred edges is okay. You don't want, that's why you turn it. If you miss a piece and it gets a little charred, don't worry about it. But you've got really basic, simple vegetables that you basically washed and rough chopped, some olive oil and some seasoning, and in a half an hour, this is the bomb. And we make big batches when we make it because I'll keep the leftovers in the fridge and heat them up the next day. Really, really good. The next thing we're going to do here, we're going to do sweet potatoes or yams. I think in the US they pretty much use the term interchangeably. I keep getting told there's technically a difference between the two, but when I go in the grocery, it seems to be the preference of the store whether they label them yams or sweet potatoes because they all look the same when I get in there. So you're going to want 1 or 2 large ones or 3 to 4 sort of smaller ones like this. And this apple's pretty small. I'd use 2 if they were this size, or 1 nice size apple. And all you're going to do, take your vegetable peeler and peel this just like you would a normal potato. Peel your apple and core it. And again, magic of me getting up early. You're going to end up with these nice sort of inch size rough chop pieces of apple and sweet potato. For this one, we're again going to use olive oil. It doesn't take quite as much. We're going to put about a tablespoon of olive oil in here. Get some real maple syrup. Don't use the fake stuff. You want the real maple syrup. The fake stuff will start to really get thick fast, and then the sugar will really if at 400 degrees, corn syrup starts to turn to charcoal pretty quick. Maple syrup, because it's a little bit thinner, holds up better. I like to put about 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. And then this is, call it a half a teaspoon. I do a dash. Let me get a fresh spatula. We don't want Italian herbs and seasoning all over our sweet potatoes. And again, same thing. You're going to stir until everything is nice and coated. You get the cinnamon spread around, the syrup, the olive oil. You give it a nice one. Now with this one, when you're putting it on the pan, try to let it drain a little bit at the edge as you bring each scoop up, because you don't want too much of that liquid spreading on your pan. I learned the first few times I made this recipe, if there's too much liquid on them, what you get is a puddle that turns into charcoal. So just kind of let them drain at the edge before you flip them on the pan. You want them nice and coated, but you don't want that extra little pool of leftover to get down in there. We're going to do the same thing. Take these and spread them out. With these, because they're sugar and they have a higher chance of blackening, same temperature, about 400 to 425 degrees. I'll set the timer for about 10 minutes. Check them every 10 minutes. Give them, take the spatula, give them a good turn. Because if you just throw these in, the Italian vegetables, if you forget they're in there and they go the whole 30 minutes on one side, you're in pretty good shape. There's a low risk anything horrible is going to happen. Because of the sugar and the maple syrup, if you leave these in and don't turn them any time over 30 minutes, you're going to have sort of blackened charcoal edges on the bottom, and it's not going to taste good. So put these in your preheated oven, and through the miracles of getting up early, what's going to come out of your preheated oven is a tray of roasted apples and sweet potatoes that looks something like that. We're going to slide those down in here. As you can see, everything just sort of gets nice and soft. You get some nice brown caramely edges. But all of this, you can tell when they're done because you can just easily put a fork into this. If you go to test it and you can't just slide a fork, say it like butter. And those sweet potatoes, just a hint of cinnamon, a hint of that maple syrup. Mix that in with some apples, and you can trick your kids into eating their vegetables and they won't even know it. Tell them this is dessert. This is really, really good. But you don't need heavy sauces. Yeah, you're putting a little bit of maple syrup. Most of that runs off. Versus, when you bake sweet potatoes in a heavy syrup. This is just a lighter, cleaner